Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Moscow attacked Kyiv with a record number of drones and missiles following Trump's phone call with Putin. Meanwhile, the US president tells Zelensky he'll support the country with air defense. Hamas consult other Palestinian groups on the ceasefire deal as Trump awaits their response. And the search continues for 30 missing people after a ferry sinks off the coast of Bali. US President Donald Trump has said he feels disappointed after his telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday. Following the conversation, Russia hit Kyiv with a record 550 drones and 11 missile strikes overnight. Ukraine's foreign minister has called it one of the worst nights in the capital. President Trump has spoken to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today and promised him air defense in the light of the escalating attacks. The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has said a diplomatic end to the war currently doesn't appear possible. Take a listen.
Undoubtedly, we pay close attention to all of President Trump's statements. During the call, President Putin repeated that we are interested in achieving our goals in special military operation, and we'd rather do it by political and diplomatic means. But for as long as it does not seem possible, we will continue our special military operation.
We can now cross live to Moscow to speak to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, thank you for joining us. Not the most positive message there from the Kremlin in response to the Trump phone call, and no date set for another round of peace talks either.
Well, that's right. We understand that at this stage, the military actions are ongoing, and Moscow has been stressing that in the absence of progress on the diplomatic track, it will continue to achieve its goals militarily, and Moscow will not be given up under any circumstances from achieving the stated goals of Russia's so-called special military operation in Ukraine and eliminating the so-called root causes of this conflict. So the two leaders speaking on Thursday evening, they have been talking about Ukraine, with Trump calling for the swift end to this conflict and the Russian president explaining the Russian reasoning. But also Moscow has said that indeed it is preferring to resolve this conflict through the political and diplomatic means. It will continue to look for the negotiated settlement. It is eager to continue direct talks with the Ukrainian side and is hoping to get the agreed date for the third round of talks with Ukraine. But having said that, we are seeing really divergent positions of Ukraine and Russia. The statements coming from the two capitals are also very different. And we understand that in the absence of the progress on these diplomatic tracks, military actions will continue on the Russian territory as well. We have seen 4 people being killed in the Donetsk region after the Ukrainian attack. We have seen the Ukrainian drones attacking the several regions in Russia and in Sergiev Posad, which is just 1 hour drive from the Russian capital. About 50,000 people have experienced the power outage as a result of the falling debris of those Ukrainian drones. 1 woman died in the Rostov region. So military actions are ongoing as sides are yet to make progress on the negotiations table.
1 person has died in Kyiv, 26 others are injured after the biggest overnight aerial attack of the war so far. Russia says these were military targets, Dasha. Can you tell us any more?
Well, that has always been the narrative coming from Moscow, that Russia is not attacking the civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. The targets of Russian attacks are the military-industrial complex objects, and Moscow has once again said, commenting on those attacks in the Kyiv area, that there has been indeed the group strike with the use of Russia's hypersonic Kinjal missiles, air ballistic missiles, as well as high-precision weapons that were used to target the military-industrial complex of Ukraine. Moscow continues to say that this is to achieve the goals of what Russia calls its military operation in Ukraine. And they are saying that as long as Ukraine continues to receive the weapons from the Western countries, Russia will have to eliminate those weapons by such strikes.
And Ukraine has said that some of the debris from the fallen drones were built in China. Is there any truth to this? And has there been any response from Russia or China?
Well, it is really difficult to verify this information. We understand from the Russian side that they are quite unwilling to comment on any of those issues, all the time stressing that Russia has accelerated its military-industrial output and they are producing more weapons that are needed to meet the demand of the operation in Ukraine. But we have seen previously Russia not confirming, not denying the information about the presence of North Korean troops in the Kursk region, and later on this information has been verified and confirmed by both sides. Neither has there been any confirmation from the Russian side with regard to the possible use of other countries' weapons in this operation. So at this stage it is very difficult to say, and we have seen the Chinese side also taking some sort of distance, not supporting Russia's operation but not condemning it or not criticizing it.
And President Trump has spoken to Zelensky today, and he has promised him air defense support after Russia's escalating attacks. How will Moscow react to this support coming from the US?
Well, from the perspective of Moscow, more weapons supplied to Ukraine means the operation will last longer and means that Kyiv is not encouraged to get to the negotiations table with a flexible position, while Moscow continues to insist that its position is very clear. It is going to achieve the stated goals. It is going to eliminate the root causes of this conflict, and any other band-aid solution to this conflict will not be working for the Russian side. So more weapons supplies to Kyiv will only extend this conflict. That's according to the narrative we are hearing from the Kremlin.
Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, thank you for joining us. Let's continue this discussion with Dr. David Ramadan, a former Republican representative from Virginia and professor of political science at George Mason University. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. One of the worst nights so far in terms of Russian strikes on Kyiv. What is your assessment of the latest attack and also Ukraine's ability to now defend themselves?
Thank you for having me, Leigh-Ann. It's devastating. I mean, these attacks are unacceptable. The death roll and toll is unacceptable. And Russia has really pushed the envelope at this point. The problem overall, though, is very complicated. We saw President Trump yesterday practically recalibrating the role of America in the Russian-Ukraine war when the Pentagon hit the brakes on key weapons to Ukraine, and especially after that call with Putin, whereby the president wasn't happy at all with Putin's solid stand and not willing to come to the table. However, today's call with Zelensky got better, and therefore the United States is hopefully back engaged. But it's complicated. We're talking about a weapon freeze. We're talking about a humanitarian aid freeze, not just a weapons freeze. We are talking about a political division in Washington. We have the traditional Republicans, the Lindsey Grahams of the world that are supporting Ukraine 100% and continue to push the president to continue to prioritize American security through Ukraine and towards the negotiating table through force, through weapons, and through full military support for Ukraine. On the other hand, you got the MAGA movement, Trump's base that came in with him and pushed him to the presidency again, that are totally against total military intervention, specifically in Ukraine and Russia, because of this unexplained relationship or feelings towards the Russian that doesn't make any sense to most of us at all. And you've got the global fallout. I mean, you got the shift that reverberates far beyond Washington. Today, our European allies are under pressure. They have increased their part of NATO, but that's not enough, because that's just production and spending in their own countries, having to also put in money towards Ukraine. So all of this is the doing of Putin that is absolutely devastating, not just Ukraine militarily, but this whole new world order that we've all been working on and working through for the last 20 years or so, that Putin decided to just disrupt altogether. Not a good situation and very complicated. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see a lot of Ukrainians dying. There are a lot of Russians dying as well. But their country started this war, and the Ukrainians are defending themselves.
Doctor, Poland's foreign minister has messaged President Trump on social media today saying Putin is mocking your peace efforts, something that he's come out with. Do you agree with the sentiment? Because you just touched on it there. We saw that phone call between President Putin and President Trump, and then this large-scale drone attack on Kyiv. Is that sentiment correct?
Not necessarily. It is defying and it is challenging the presidency and the power of the United States, represented by Donald J. Trump today. So I wouldn't say that they are making fun, or I can't remember what the exact word that he used, but it is more challenging to the United States. Putin certainly is challenging the United States today, certainly challenging the will of President Trump, certainly challenging how far America is willing to go, and betting on the fact that America will not sustain its support to Ukraine. That's what he is betting on. I don't think that's going to work out for Putin.
Now, what do you have hope for? Is a breakthrough actually possible from the recent telephone conversations between President Trump and Putin, and of course Trump speaking to Zelensky today, which you said almost seemed a little bit more positive? The US president told Zelensky he wants to help with air defense due to Russian attacks. That's according to reports we're getting on that telephone conversation. So is a breakthrough likely in this very complicated situation?
I wouldn't call it a breakthrough, unfortunately, Leigh-Ann. I think we may see a continuation again of American support at a lesser level than it was before. Remember, up till this point, the United States were still spending or executing, the administration was executing the spending that was put together by Congress during the previous administration. So there was something like $60 billion that the previous Congress had dedicated for Ukraine. And what we were seeing was the delivery of that money and that weaponry that had been put together in the previous administration. This new Congress, and with the new big, beautiful bill, as supposedly it's called, that passed just yesterday and will be signed today by President Trump, that level of support is not appropriated there. So we're going to see continuous support because America cannot stop supporting Ukraine. However, it may not be at the same level. And this is now the time for Europe to step up so that they can fill in the gap, because the gap is certainly going to exist.
So I want to talk to you about Europe getting involved and filling that gap. Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron will be holding a summit in London on Ukraine next week, since the US-led talks have pretty much stalled. Are European allies feeling more pressure to step up and help? Obviously, we saw the NATO defence spending, that's now gone up to 5%. But are these just talks about talks, or is anything concrete actually happening from the European Union and NATO?
We haven't seen much action yet, but I think they're going to need to do so. Again, they were depending mostly on U.S. support and financing the war to a certain extent. But now that the gap is going to exist, they're going to have to step up. It is in their backyard. The European Union is going to be challenged if for some reason Ukraine loses this war, because then Putin will go beyond. They'll go into other European countries, some that may be part of the European Union, certainly NATO members. Poland is certainly a target and on the list. Therefore, there's more at risk for Europe today than there is for the U.S. And with the America First agenda of the United States, this is going to be on Europe to move up and do that. The challenge is really balancing strategic interests with moral commitments. How the U.S. chooses to lead or step back will shape not just Ukraine's future here, Leigh-Ann, but the credibility of the West as a whole. And what Europe decides to do to fill up that gap will also decide the credibility of the West and credibility of Europe and their strength with or without the United States. Those of us in the United States that are in support of Ukraine will continue to do our best to push. That is the majority of the sentiment of the academic world and the political world and the conservative world and the liberal world, with the exception of the MAGA segment of the Republican Party. That will, in my opinion, ensure continuation of support of Ukraine, however, not to the same levels that we've seen before. And again, I hope that the Europeans step up and fill up that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Europeans are trying to do their best to keep Donald Trump on side and to step up to that further defense spending. But I just want to ask you a final question, if I can, Doctor. Is this the most powerful Donald Trump has been in his second term as president, after we witnessed that mega bill being passed yesterday? Of course, the ceasefire between Israel and Iran that we saw too, and also the potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that could possibly be, hopefully, tied up soon.
Most certainly. The Donald Trump version of his second presidency is quite a bit different than the first. One, he's got the majority in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, and that's why he was able to push the budget bill, what he calls the big, beautiful bill, through, regardless of not a single Democrat voting for it. He's got a cabinet that is fully MAGA, fully Make America Great Again type of individuals that will not and will challenge at all the president, but will absolutely apply and push forward his agendas and his beliefs more than 100% in some cases. They try to overdo him to a certain extent. And he's got the experience of what he went through the first. Look, the first President Trump, or 45, the 45th president at the time, didn't know what he was doing. He was new to policy. He was new to politics. When he won, really, he didn't know that he was going to win. The campaign became, okay, I ran for president, and oops, I made it. I'm in. That has changed over the second time, and he sat outside of the White House for 4 years preparing of what he wanted to do in his second round. Now, in his second presidency, he is more powerful than ever, and now he is fully exercising or even going beyond the powers of the presidency. And that's what we're seeing with his executive actions, that he is challenging the limits with. Most of those will continue to be executed and applied until they are the challenges to those executive orders will make it through the Supreme Court. Some of them will be stopped. We've seen some of them being stopped already because he's truly pushing the limits. He is exercising more power than the traditional limits of the powers of the United States president, of any United States president. Therefore, he is more powerful than he was before, and arguably today more powerful than any other president, because he is pushing the limits through executive orders and pushing beyond those red lines that other presidents had abided by. He's not abiding by it.
Dr. David Ramadan, former Republican representative from Virginia and professor of political science at George Mason University. It was great to have your insights. Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Leah.
Now, President Trump says he should know Hamas's response to the ceasefire proposal within 24 hours. Earlier this week, the US president said Israel had agreed to the 60-day ceasefire deal with hopes of ending the war within that time. On Friday, Hamas said it was consulting with other Palestinian groups in Gaza on a plan. I'm now joined by Professor John Dabeet, president of the US Palestinian Council in Iowa. Professor, pleasure to have you on the show. Hamas says it's studying the ceasefire proposal. Are you expecting the militant group to respond in the next 24 hours, as President Donald Trump has suggested?
First of all, thanks for having me, Leigh-Ann. Yes, indeed, I expect them to respond. I think they are obviously discussing, according to the news, they're discussing details with other Palestinian factions right now, and they will be responding soon or within 24 hours. Let's look and think and talk about what's on the table right now. Basically, according to the news, we learned that we have a 60 days temporary ceasefire, in which during the 60 days, we have different steps and different pieces into this 60 days temporary ceasefire. For example, they are talking about an exchange of hostages and Israeli hostages, and I call them also Palestinian hostages, even though most news media refer to them as prisoners. Because, you know, the Palestinians are locked into the Israeli prison against their will. For being Palestinians. Hence, I call them hostages too. But also, you know, they are talking about providing the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, with more aid and rebuilding of Gaza. They are talking about after 60 days of final negotiations that leads to a final settlement between the two. They are talking about, you know, having this, as I said, a military pause for 60 days in which during this time they will be again achieving the vision of President Trump for the cessation of hostilities, fights, ceasefire, and all that stuff. Here at this point, it's important to stop for a second and think about the intention. Is the intention really to have a full and lasting peace? That's one question. The second question is the intention is to be very objective in brokering that ceasefire and that peace, and also consider what Palestinians went through at least the past almost 2 years. So those are very important questions that yet to answer by President Trump.
So, Professor, how weakened is Hamas following the US and Israeli strikes on Iran? And after, as you've said, nearly 2 years of war with Israel, what leverage does the group actually have left?
Well, according to the news media, I mean, we're hearing even the Israeli military people or personnel, they are still talking about strong Hamas in Gaza. They are talking about well-organized, over 20,000 militants still fighting. So this is an issue. But at the end of the day, I think Palestinians has their legitimate representative, which is the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And the question here is, I wonder why the United States is avoiding the PLO and avoiding to sit down with the Palestinian Liberation Organization and talk long-term peace based on justice with the representative and the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, whether they are in Palestine or outside Palestine. This is also a question that yet to be answered by the Trump administration. But again, if we go back to history, we know what President Trump did during his first presidency from 2016 to 2020. We know which side he decided to stand and support. So those are also issues that we have to be very cautious. What I would say, trusting the Trump administration when it comes to any Palestinian issues now and in the future.
President Trump will be hosting Netanyahu at the White House. That's happening on Monday. And you mentioned this to me. We know Hamas is seeking guarantees that a new US-backed ceasefire agreement would eventually lead to the war's end. Could we see Israel and the US change their stance on the agreement?
We could. You know, the issue with the President Trump administration is that every day we are hearing something different. There is what I could call, there is no political stability with this administration. So, and that's a major issue for those of us who try to analyze the political scenery. So anything is expected with President Trump. Now, based on the meeting, as you just mentioned on Monday, we're hoping that President Trump will push Netanyahu to accept a full and final ceasefire. You know, the Palestinian people suffered enough already. And we know numbers and statistics are out. We know how many Palestinians got killed and murdered during this at least the past 2 years. And I think it's time for the Palestinians to live like any other nation, like any other people, in peace that is based on justice, enjoy their homeland, enjoy their independent country, and flourish after that. But we cannot continue to accept the Israeli occupation or military occupation of Palestine and say, okay, well, let's try to put a small Band-Aid on a big wound, thinking that this small Band-Aid gonna cover that big wound. It's not gonna cover that big wound, and that's why we, the Palestinian people, are looking for a total and comprehensive cessation of hostility against them, and also an independent state where they can live like any other nation in peace and start building their future, their educational system, everything, their economy, everything that any country usually try to achieve as they are rebuilding their nation.
So, Professor, I just want to put the other side to you. So we know the October the 7th attack was carried out by Hamas. It did enter Israel, took Israeli hostages and caused absolute chaos. And this is why we have seen the situation that we're in now. So globally, do you think that support for Israel is now not as strong from those October the 7th attacks after 21 months of war, after aid issues that we've seen within the country? What's the situation and the feeling when it comes to Israel now? Because there was a lot of sympathy after that October the 7th attack, which was carried out by Hamas.
Yes. I have two sets of answer for your question. Number one, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict did not start on October 7th. You know, the Palestinians has been under the military occupation for the past 77 years. Palestinians suffered a lot throughout many years, and the whole world did not lift a finger trying to help the Palestinians in, granting them their independence and living as any other nation in peace. That's one piece. The other piece is, yes, in the beginning, we saw that sympathy for the Israelis, but everything started to change when the whole world started witnessing the ethnic cleansing and the genocide that Israel carries on a daily basis against civilians, against kids, against women, against the elderly in Gaza and in the West Bank too. The destruction of the Palestinian cities, roads, buildings, and so on. So when the world started to see the different narratives that they did not witness before, the world started to change. For example, I live in the United States, and I can assure you that right now, the support for Israel is at the lowest rate ever, because again, people through the social media and through reading in the news, the articles in the newspapers and watching the news, they started to see the real Israel. They started to see Israel who is committing a daily genocide against the Palestinian civilians. So there is a very important issue here that the demonstrations, for example, are all over the world. We witness that every day. We hear about it. We see it on TVs every day. Also, you know what happened in the United States inside the colleges and universities. Among the younger generations, and in particular the Democrats, right now almost 55% of those younger generations Democrats are standing with Palestine. Because, and not just standing with Palestine, but also they are protesting. They are going into the streets. They are raising their voice. They are raising the Palestinian flags. They are calling for free Palestine. They are calling for an end of this military occupation. So as the narrative of the Palestinian narrative started to spread around, and as people started to see what's going on in Gaza and West Bank, we started to witness a shift in the way people sees that conflict, and a shift in the way that people started to react to this, genocide and ethnic cleansing against the civilian Palestinians.
Professor, I've spoken to many people from within Israel about the situation, and they would argue that Israel has the right to defend themselves against Hamas and the Iranian proxies within the Middle East. We've seen the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. And they would also say that Hamas are terrorists who are using the Palestinian people as human shields. What do you make of this argument?
Well, obviously, it's a propaganda, and it's a propaganda that is based on lies. The Israelis are trying to find every single way to justify the killing and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian civilians. I mean, it's no strange to all of us to say that, for example, from day one, the Israeli defense minister made it very clear that the Palestinians are animals. He made that statement, not the Palestinians, nor the Americans, nor anybody else. And he called for the cutting the water, the food, medicine, and everything on Gaza. This is, according to international law, is basically an ethnic cleansing, is genocide. We know that several countries, including South Africa, decided to go to the ICJ and launch a case of genocide against Israel, and in particular against Netanyahu and his defense minister. We hear every day statements that are totally ugly statements, I call them, from Smotrich and Ben Gvir against the Palestinian population. Now, if they are talking about Gaza and Hamas, but why they are doing a lot of destruction and killing and detention for Palestinians in the West Bank? So in the West Bank, as you know, the Palestinian Authority are in charge with the West Bank. But we are witnessing also a daily incursion against the Palestinian cities in the West Bank, a daily killing and destruction in the West Bank. So basically, the Israelis are free to share their propaganda, but it's up to people all around the world to believe it or not. And as a person who lives in the United States and witnessing firsthand what's going on in the United States, I see that more and more people around the globe and in the United States are now standing with the Palestinians against the Israeli destruction.
Professor John Dabeet, president of the U.S. Palestinian Council in Iowa, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
30 people are still missing at sea in Indonesia after a ferry sank off the coast of East Java. 29 people were saved before the search was called off on Thursday after poor visibility. Family members are still waiting for news of their missing loved ones as the search continued today. Camille Nedelec reports.
Desperate for news, but fearful of what it might be.
I had a bad feeling because I called him repeatedly, but he didn't pick up, and that's not like him. Then I called his boss again, and we checked my husband's location with the GPS, but I couldn't see his position, and now his phone is dead.
Dayu Mate Silawati knows her husband was on the ferry that sank in the Bali Strait on Wednesday. She refuses to leave the port until she knows for sure what happened to him.
He's a very good man and husband. We do everything together. I hope he can be found quickly.
Hundreds of rescue workers were searching the sea for bodies and survivors on Friday. Their efforts have been hampered by rain and strong currents. On the second day of searching, hope is dwindling for the dozens of people that are still missing. The vessel sank about halfway through the hour-long journey from Java to Bali. That ferry passage is one of the busiest in the country. The boat was carrying at least 65 people, but in Indonesia it's common for the real number of people on board to differ from the manifest. Survivors say the disaster happened quickly and that the crew did not have time to warn passengers of the danger.
The current was very strong and the waves were large. The ferry swayed side to side. About 30 minutes into the journey, all the cargo trucks tilted to the left. Within 5 minutes, the ferry sank, so we immediately took the life vests and threw them on. There were 2 lifeboats.
Indonesian authorities are investigating the cause of the sinking and have already said that high waves and bad weather could have been a factor. Camille Nedilek, Al Arabiya.
Now here's a reminder of our top stories. Moscow attacked Kyiv with a record number of drones and missiles following Trump's phone call with Putin. Moscow attacked Kyiv again with that record number of drones. And we've also heard that Zelensky and Donald Trump have held a phone call today. Hamas consult other Palestinian groups on the ceasefire deal as Trump awaits their response. And the search continues for 30 missing people after a ferry sinks off the coast of Bali. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. The rail deal with Tom Burgess-Watson, well, that's coming up next. And we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with the best of this week's W News Extra. Goodbye, happy Friday, and thank you for joining us.